She was shaking so hard the tray almost dropped, blood soaking through her uniform right there at the mafia boss's table, and every man in that room was already deciding how to destroy her. Every mafia associate, every rival gang member, all watching this woman stand there frozen with no way out. The most feared man in Busan could have looked away like everyone else. He didn't. Then Kim Junho stood up,
It's all
and the
right.
entire
I've got
club
you.
held its
But everyone
breath
can
like
see.
they already
No
knew
one will.
someone
My
was
men
about
will
to
handle
get
it.
hurt.
Thank you.
And what he did next is the reason 3 people ended up dead by morning. She ran. Blood soaked through the white fabric of her uniform, spreading like a dark bloom across her stomach as she sprinted through the back corridor of Club Lumiere, her shoes slapping wet against the concrete. Behind her, she could hear the laughter, sharp, cruel, echoing off the walls like it would never stop. And then the door at the end of the hallway swung open. A man filled the frame. Broad shoulders. Jaw like it was carved from granite. Eyes so cold they could freeze the air itself. He looked at her, really looked, and for 1 second, the entire building went silent. That was the night Amina thought her life was over. But it was the night she met the man who changed everything. If this kind of story hits you, smash that subscribe button right now. Don't wait. Let's go. She never expected the most feared man in Busan to protect her. She never expected anything except survival. But here she was, bleeding, shaking, staring into the eyes of Kim Junho, the man who owned half the city's shadows, and he wasn't looking at her like she was nothing. He was looking at her like she mattered. But let's rewind. Let's go back to where it all began. Amina had learned early that the world didn't hand you softness. Not if you were poor. Not if you were different. And especially not if you were both. She was 23. Afro-Korean. Beautiful in a way that made people stare and then look away too quickly, like her presence was something they hadn't been prepared to feel. Her skin was deep and rich, her hair thick and natural, and in Busan, in the clubs, on the streets, in the markets, she stuck out in ways that made people uncomfortable. Good. Let them be uncomfortable. She had bigger problems. Her mother was sick. Had been sick for 2 years now. The kind of sick that ate money like fire eats paper, fast, hungry, and it never stopped. Amina worked every shift she could get at Club Lumiere, a high-end establishment where wealthy men drank expensive whiskey and women in tight uniforms served them like they were gods. She wasn't a god. She was a waitress. And waitresses didn't complain. Waitresses smiled. Waitresses survived. That's all she wanted. To survive long enough to get her mother better. Every night, she tied her hair back, put on the white uniform, and walked into that club like it didn't eat pieces of her soul. And every night, she walked out a little smaller than before. But she never stopped. Kim Junho had never been soft. He'd been molded by loss, hardened by violence, and sharpened by a world that rewarded ruthlessness. By 31, he controlled the largest syndicate network on the southern coast of Korea. Men feared him. Women avoided him. Rivals disappeared. He didn't smile. He didn't make small talk. He didn't let anyone close enough to see what lived behind those cold eyes. But there was something. Something buried so deep that even he had almost forgotten it was there. The night he first noticed Amina, it wasn't because of her face or her voice or the way she moved through the crowd. It was because of something small. An old man at table 12 had dropped his glass. Whiskey pooled across the floor. Every other server walked around it. Looked away. Pretended it wasn't there. But Amina stopped. Knelt down. Picked it up. And when the old man muttered a quiet thank you, embarrassed, almost broken, she smiled at him like he was the only person in the room. Junho watched from across the club. Said nothing. But something shifted inside his chest. Something he couldn't name. Not yet. 3 weeks later, everything changed. It was a Thursday. The club was packed more than usual. Tonight was a big night. A meeting between Junho's syndicate and a rival faction led by a man named Park Sung-jin, a snake in expensive clothes who smiled too wide and meant none of it. Amina had been working since noon. Her feet ached. Her back was tight. And something else, something physical, had been building all day. A heaviness in her lower abdomen. A dull, persistent pressure that she kept trying to ignore. Not tonight, she thought, gripping her tray. Please, not tonight. Her manager, Mr. Cho, had pulled her aside an hour earlier. He was a short, sweaty man with a mouth that never stopped moving. Table 1 tonight, he said, jabbing a finger toward the VIP section. Junho's table. You serve. You smile. You don't speak unless spoken to. And for the love of God, Amina, don't mess this up. She nodded. Swallowed the fear. Walked toward the table like her legs weren't shaking. The pressure in her stomach was getting worse. Not now. Not here. Please. But bodies don't negotiate. Bodies don't wait for convenient moments. And Amina's body had been warning her all night. She felt it the second she reached table 1. A sharp, unmistakable warmth. Lower. Sudden. Wrong. Her breath caught. She kept walking. Kept her face neutral. Kept smiling like Mr. Cho had told her to. She set the tray down with steady hands. Poured the whiskey. Didn't look at anyone. But then she moved a step back, and one of the men at the table, a loud, red-faced associate of Park Sung-jin, glanced down. His eyes widened. What the hell? Amina looked down. Blood. Bright and unmistakable, blooming across the white fabric of her uniform at the waist. It was soaking through fast. Too fast. Something was wrong. This wasn't normal. This was too much. Too sudden, and the panic hit her like a wall. The table went quiet. Then the whispers started. They spread through the club like smoke, fast, invisible, impossible to stop. Heads turned. Phones came out. Someone laughed. Then another person. And another. Mr. Cho materialized at her side in seconds. His face was white with fury. He grabbed her arm, hard enough to bruise, and hissed through his teeth. What did you do? Are you trying to destroy this place? I didn't. Amina's voice came out broken. I didn't know. Get out of my sight. He shoved her forward. Now. She stumbled. Her hands were shaking. The blood was still spreading, warm, unstoppable, and every single person in the room was looking at her. Some with disgust. Some with pity. Most with something worse, amusement. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. The room was so loud and so silent at the same time, and Amina stood there frozen, bleeding, humiliated, and felt every wall she had ever built start to crack. And then the room went completely still. Because Junho stood up. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He simply rose from his chair, slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore, and the entire club responded like gravity had shifted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Glasses froze in the air. Even Park Sung-jin, that venomous man with his venomous smile, leaned back in his chair and said nothing. Junho walked toward her. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Like he had all the time in the world and everyone in this room knew it. He stopped in front of her. Close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jawline. Close enough to feel the weight of who he was pressing down on the air between them. He said nothing for a long moment. Just looked at her. Then, without breaking eye contact, he unzipped his jacket, a dark, expensive thing, and draped it around her shoulders. Gently. Like she was made of glass. Like this was the most natural thing in the world. He turned to the room. Everyone looks away. Now. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Every single person in Club Lumiere turned their face in the opposite direction. Phones disappeared. Laughter died. The silence was absolute. Then Junho leaned down, just slightly, and spoke to her. Quiet. So quiet that only she could hear. Breathe, he said. I've got you. Amina looked up at him. Her eyes were burning. Her whole body was trembling. And for the first time in years, maybe for the first time in her entire life, someone had said those words to her and actually meant them. She breathed. She expected punishment the next morning. She expected to be fired. To be blacklisted. To walk out of Club Lumiere with nothing and have to explain to her sick mother why the money had stopped coming. Instead, she was called to a private room on the second floor. Junho was sitting at a small table. 2 cups of tea. A window that looked out over the gray Busan skyline. He gestured for her to sit. She sat. Slowly. Carefully. Like one wrong move might shatter whatever fragile thing was happening in this moment. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. Not unkindly. Just factual. Like he understood that she needed to hear it. She nodded. Didn't trust her voice. He wrapped his hands around his tea. Stared into it for a long time before he spoke again. "I had a sister," he said. Amina looked up. "Younger than me. By 4 years. His jaw tightened barely, but she saw it. She worked in a club like this one. Different city. Different owner. He paused. One night, something similar happened to her. Something humiliating. Something she couldn't control. The room was so quiet that Amina could hear the rain starting outside. No one helped her, he said. Not one person. He looked at her then. And for the first time, the coldness in his eyes cracked, just a fraction, and underneath it, she saw something raw. Something that had never fully healed. "I won't let that happen again," he said. "Not while I'm breathing." Amina sat with that for a long time. The tea grew cold. The rain kept falling. And something between them, something unnamed, something dangerous, began to take shape. After that night, things shifted. Junho made sure Amina was never harassed at the club again. A quiet word here. A look there. His men, loyal, silent, watchful, made sure no one touched her. She didn't have to ask. She didn't have to explain. It just happened. And she began to see him differently. Not as a monster. Not as the shadow that half of Busan whispered about in fear. But as a man. A man who brought her food when she forgot to eat. A man who asked once, quietly, how her mother was doing, and then never mentioned it again, but always made sure the medical bills were covered. She brought him coffee one evening. Black. No sugar. He looked at it like she'd handed him something sacred. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Neither did you," she said. "With any of it." He almost smiled. Almost. They talked more after that. Small things at first. Her dreams. His silence. The way the city looked different at 3 a.m. when all the noise died down and it was just them and the rain and the neon glow bleeding through the windows. "I want to open something," she told him one night. Something small. A cafe, maybe. Somewhere warm. He listened. Really listened. Like her words were the only ones in the world that mattered. "You should," he said. And she believed him. One evening, she was leaning against the railing of the second-floor balcony, watching the city lights blur in the distance. He came up beside her. Close. Closer than he'd ever been. The air between them charged with something electric, something inevitable. She turned her head. He was already looking at her. The space between them disappeared inch by inch, breath by breath, until she could feel the warmth of him, could see the way his eyes dropped, just briefly, to her lips. And then a door slammed somewhere below, and the moment shattered like glass. Neither of them spoke about it. But neither of them forgot it either. Mr. Cho never forgave her. Behind the scenes, the club manager had been furious, not at the incident itself, but at the way Junho had handled it. It made Cho look weak. It made him look like he couldn't control his own staff. And Cho was not a man who forgave easily. He started talking to Park Sung-jin. The rival gang leader was already looking for leverage against Junho, any crack in his armor, any vulnerability he could exploit. And Amina, the woman Junho had publicly protected, was the perfect target. It started with small things. A note slipped into her locker. A van that followed her home at night. A man she didn't recognize watching her from across the street. She told Junho on a Tuesday. His face didn't change, but his eyes went cold, colder than she had ever seen them. The kind of cold that made the air feel dangerous. "How long?" he asked. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. She had been afraid for 2 weeks and hadn't said anything because she didn't want to be a burden. Didn't want to prove that being close to him was a mistake. He found out who was behind it within 24 hours. He dealt with them within 48. Amina never saw how. She didn't ask. Some things she understood were better left in the dark. But the night he came back, after it was done, after the threat had been neutralized, he found her in the second-floor room. She was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, shaking. He sat down beside her. Said nothing. Just stayed. After a long time, he spoke. "Staying near me will destroy you," he said. His voice was rough, quiet, almost broken. "Everyone I care about ends up in danger. That's the truth. That's what I am." Amina looked at him. At this man who carried the weight of an entire underworld on his shoulders and still found ways to be gentle with her. "Then stop being what you are," she said. He looked at her like she'd spoken in a language he'd never heard before. The argument happened 3 nights later. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't calm. It was loud and raw, and everything they had been holding back came pouring out like a dam breaking. "You can't just leave," he shouted. "You don't understand what happens if I disappear. People will come looking for me, for anyone connected to me." "And what about me?" she fired back. "What about my life? Am I just supposed to stand here and watch you destroy yourself? I'm trying to protect you." "No." She was crying now. Not from sadness. From fury. From something deeper, something that had been building for months. "You're trying to protect yourself from feeling something, and you're using me as the reason why." The room went silent. Junho stared at her, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. And then, in a voice so quiet it almost disappeared, "I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Heavy. Terrifying. Real. "I love you," he said again. Like saying it twice might make it survivable. "And that's exactly why I need to change." Amina closed the distance between them, took his face in her hands, looked into his eyes, those cold, guarded, beautiful eyes, and saw something she had never seen before. "Hope. Then change," she whispered. "I'll be right here." 1 year later, the cafe opened on a quiet street in the Houndy district. Small. Warm. Wooden tables and soft light, and the smell of fresh bread every morning. The sign above the door read, "Lumiere." Not the club. Something new. Something theirs. Amina's mother sat in the corner booth every afternoon, healthy now, wrapped in a blanket, reading a book and smiling at the world like she had all the time in it. Junho stood behind the counter. No suit. No jacket. Just a simple shirt and an apron and a quiet piece that looked foreign on him, like a language he was still learning to speak. When Amina walked in that morning, coffee in hand, he looked up. And he smiled. A real one. The kind that changed his whole face. The kind that made him look like the man he had always been underneath all the armor. She set the coffee in front of him. He caught her hand. Held it. Sunlight poured through the window, warm, golden, nothing like the neon glow of Club Lumiere. It felt like a different world. Because it was. If you made it this far, you already know what to do. Subscribe, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. I'll see you in the next one. The night Amina thought her life ended was the night love found her. Fade to black.